This is part 9 of Angular CRUD tutorial. In this video, we'll discuss working with a select list, that is a drop-down list in Angular. We'll also discuss how to have one of the select list option selected by default, and finally how to disable the select list. Working with a select list is similar to working with the other controls like text box, checkbox, radio button, etc. So here is what we want to be able to do. We want to include this department drop-down list with these options: help desk, HR, ID, etc. So let's take a look at the HTML required for this. Here is our create employee component view template, and right here we've got is active checkbox HTML. So let's make a copy of this, and then we'll change the bits that are required. We don't need this form control div, so let's get rid of that, and let's also get rid of the closing div. And let's move this input type checkbox out of the label. And for our drop down list, we want the label as department, and we want a select list. So instead of an input element, let's use a select element, and with the select element we also need its corresponding closing tag. So let's include the closing tag as well, and let's give our select element an ID. Let's call it department with a lowercase d, and let's link this label to the select element, and we do that by using the for attribute, and we set the value of the for attribute to the ID of the element that we want to link to. And let's also give the name attribute, and we are setting name also to department, and we don't need this type attribute on a select element, so let's get rid of that, and let's remove this duplicate name element, and ng model is going to be department, and on the select element we are going to use one more bootstrap class, and that is the form control bootstrap class. So at this point, if we save our changes and then if we take a look at the browser, we will have an empty drop-down list. Notice we have our department drop-down list right here. When I click on its label, the drop-down list receives focus, and if we drop this list down, we don't have any options here, and here are the 4 options that we want: help desk, HR, ID, payroll. So let's include the required options within the select element. The first option that we want is help desk. Now this help desk text is what the end user sees, and these options right here are departments. In reality, every department will also have its unique department ID, and that is what we want to save when we save this employee. So let's also set the value attribute of the option to the ID of the corresponding department. Let's give an ID value of 1 for our help desk department. Similarly, let's include the rest of the options. While we are here, let's also change the code within our component class. Let's log the value property of the employee form instead of logging the entire ng form. Notice when we drop this list down, we see all our 4 departments, and when I select a department, its corresponding value is captured by the Angular generated form model, and along the same lines, when we click the save button, we also have the department logged to the console as expected. At the moment, we have hard-coded the select list options within the HTML. In our next video, we'll discuss how to get the select list options from the component class instead. Now let's discuss how to have one of these options selected by default when the form initially loads. Let's say, for example, we want our IT department to be selected, so we include the selected attribute on that option. Now if we take a look at the browser, we expect the IT department to be selected by default, but notice that is not the case. If we remove this ng model directive, then the selected attribute works as expected. So if we take a look at the browser now, notice we have the IT department selected. Now if we put this ng model directive back in place, it does not work again. Notice we don't have the IT department selected again. In Angular, we use this ng model directive for two-way data binding. So to make this work, within our component class, let's include department property and then initialize that with a value of the option that we want to have selected by default. In our case, we want the IT department to be selected and its value is 3. So we have initialized the department property with a value of 3. So when we save our changes and take a look at the browser, when this form completes loading, we should have the IT department selected. There we go. Now with this department property in place, even if we remove the selected attribute from the IT option, it should still work exactly the same way as before. When the form reloads, we should still have the IT department selected. That is because of the two-way data binding that we get with this ng model directive. Finally, let's discuss how to disable a select element. To disable a select element, all we have to do is include the disabled attribute. Notice we have the department drop-down list disabled. Because this drop-down list is disabled, when we click the save button, its corresponding property department is not logged to the console. So within the console, we see all the other properties except the department property. In our form, we don't want the select list to be disabled, so let's remove the disabled attribute. We also don't want any of the option to be selected by default, so let's also remove the department property. Notice now we don't have the department select list disabled. When we click the save button, the corresponding department value is logged to the console. On the slide right here, we have the HTML required for our department select list. Thank you for listening and have a great day.